My name is Valentina Monroe, and 5 years ago, my husband accused me of cheating and cast me out of his life in front of 300 people at a charity gala. What he didn't know? I was pregnant with his 4 sons. But that was just the beginning. I survived the humiliation, raised our children alone, and came back to the very place he disgraced me. Not just with DNA proof, but with 20% of his company in my hands. And in the most tense moment, as he stared at the boys who looked exactly like him, I said, "Genetics are funny that way, aren't they?" Before I share the full story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to rise above heartbreak for the sake of family. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my husband work the room at Seattle's annual Cherry Blossom Charity Gala. Damian Whitmore moved through the crowd like he owned the world, which, in many ways, he did. CEO of Whitmore Estates, master of a real estate empire that stretched from Seattle to New York. And for 3 years, he'd been mine. My fingers brushed against my stomach, still flat, holding the secret I'd discovered just that morning. 4 heartbeats. The ultrasound technician had checked 3 times, her eyes wide with disbelief. Quadruplets. 4 tiny miracles growing inside me. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 different ways during the drive here. Maybe Damian would drop his champagne. Maybe he'd sweep me into his arms right there in the ballroom. Maybe he'd cry, though I'd never seen him cry, not once. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice suddenly boomed through the microphone, and the string quartet fell silent. 300 of Seattle's elite turned toward the stage where my husband stood, his jaw set in that way I knew meant trouble. "Before we continue with tonight's festivities, I have an announcement." My heart swelled. Was he going to? No, he couldn't know about the pregnancy yet, unless he'd found the test I'd hidden in our bathroom. I started pushing through the crowd, wanting to be beside him for whatever grand gesture he was planning. "My wife, Valentina Monroe Whitmore, has betrayed me." The words hit like ice water. The room gasped collectively, and suddenly every eye found me frozen halfway to the stage. "The private investigator's report arrived this afternoon," Damian continued, his voice carrying that same steady tone he used for quarterly earnings calls. "Multiple hotel receipts, photographs. The evidence is comprehensive." "Damian, what are you—" My voice cracked. "Furthermore," he raised his hand to silence me, "I am medically sterile, have been since birth, a condition I've recently confirmed through extensive testing." His eyes found mine across the room, cold as winter granite. "So whoever's child you're carrying, Valentina, it isn't mine." The champagne glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the marble floor. The sound seemed to echo forever. "Security will escort you from Silverwood Estate to collect your belongings. The divorce papers will be filed Monday morning." In the corner of my vision, I caught Delilah, Damian's cousin and CFO, trying to suppress a smile. She stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder, playing the role of supportive family perfectly. 2 security guards flanked me. One of them, Marcus, who'd always been kind, wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said quietly, "please come with us." The walk through that ballroom felt like miles. 300 people parting like the Red Sea, their whispers following me like arrows. My legs moved mechanically, my mind screaming denials that wouldn't form into words. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was Damian accepting a consoling embrace from Delilah, her manicured fingers splayed possessively across his back. Boulder, Colorado became my sanctuary, though sanctuary feels too peaceful a word for those first brutal months. My college roommate, Maya Lynn, didn't ask questions when I showed up at her door at 2 a.m., mascara streaking my cheeks, designer gown traded for sweatpants at a gas station outside Denver. "Stay as long as you need," she'd said, handing me tea that smelled like ginger and hope. The morning sickness hit like a freight train. Not morning sickness. All day, all night, curled on the bathroom floor sickness. Maya, brilliant immunologist that she was, researched every remedy while I wondered if dying might be easier than carrying 4 babies whose father had thrown me away like trash. "You need to file a response," Maya urged one snowy morning as I graded online English compositions, my new income source. Fight for what's yours? With what money? I laughed bitterly. Damian froze our joint accounts. My lawyer quit after one meeting. Apparently, Whitmore Estates is too powerful to challenge. The truth was worse than just poverty. The shame had burrowed so deep I couldn't imagine facing him again. Everyone in Seattle believed his story. My phone had blown up with messages before I'd finally thrown it in a dumpster. Former friends calling me a gold digger, a cheater, worse things I couldn't repeat. What about a paternity test? Maya suggested. He said he's sterile, said he had medical proof. I placed my hands on my growing belly. At 5 months with quads, I looked ready to deliver. Maybe these babies aren't his. Maybe I did something I don't remember, or... Stop. Maya grabbed my shoulders. You're the most boringly faithful person I know. You wouldn't even dance with other guys at my wedding. But doubt is a poison that doesn't need logic to spread. Every night, I'd lie awake trying to remember any blank spaces, any drinks that tasted wrong, any morning I'd woken up confused. Nothing. Just a vast emptiness where my certainty used to live. The 20-week ultrasound changed everything. 4 boys. 4 perfect, identical boys, with strong heartbeats and stubborn positions that made the technician work for every measurement. The doctor confirmed what I'd suspected. Identical quadruplets from a single split. Astronomical odds. A miracle. They're fighters, the doctor said, smiling, just like their mom. I sobbed in that examination room, not from sadness, but from fierce, primitive love. These boys were mine. Only mine. Damian had made his choice, and now I was making mine. We don't need him, I whispered to my belly that night, snow falling silent outside Maya's guest room window. We have each other. But even as I said it, I saved every medical bill, every receipt, every piece of evidence. Because somewhere deep down, below the hurt and rage, a tiny flame of truth refused to die. Those boys were Damian's. And someday, somehow, he'd have to face what he'd thrown away. 5 years. That's how long it took to build myself back into someone who could walk into Whitmore Tower without shaking. Mommy, my tie feels funny. Elliot, my smallest, tugged at his collar. Mine too, echoed Ethan, Evan, and Edward in unison. They did that sometimes, speaking with one voice that still sent chills down my spine. 4 boys in matching navy suits, their dark hair slicked back just like their father used to wear his. The resemblance was undeniable. Damian's strong jaw, his storm gray eyes, even that little crease between their eyebrows when they concentrated. Remember what we practiced? I smoothed Elliot's tie. Best behavior. We're here for business. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd spent 3 years carefully acquiring shares in Whitmore Estates through shell companies and investment funds. 20%, built piece by piece while teaching online, freelance consulting, and eventually launching my own PR firm. Every spare penny invested, leveraged, multiplied. Maya called it obsession. I called it justice. The Winter Gala hadn't changed. Same crystal chandeliers, same champagne fountains, same crowd of Seattle's elite pretending philanthropy mattered more than profit. And there, center stage like always, stood Damian. 5 years had been kind to him, a touch of silver at his temples, laugh lines that hadn't been there before, though I wondered what he'd found to laugh about. Delilah hung on his arm in a red dress that screamed possession, sporting an engagement ring that could be seen from space. The string quartet stopped mid-note when we entered. "Mommy, why is everyone staring?" Edward whispered. Because we're fabulous," I said, head high, leading my boys through the parting crowd. The whisper started immediately. "Is that Valentina? Look at those children! My God, they look exactly like..." Damian turned slowly, his champagne glass halfway to his lips. The color drained from his face like water from a burst dam. The glass slipped from his hand. Karma was nothing, if not poetic, shattering on the same marble where mine had fallen 5 years ago. "Hello, Damian," my voice carried across the silent ballroom. "I believe you know my attorneys have been trying to reach you. I'm here to claim my board seat." "Your what?" Delilah's voice pitched high. 20% ownership of Whitmore Estates." I pulled the documents from my purse. "Properly filed with the SEC as of yesterday." I believe that entitles me to a voice in how this company is run. You can't, Damian started, his voice hoarse. Can't what? Succeed without you? I laughed, and it felt like breaking free from chains. I've done quite well, actually. Monroe PR represents half of Seattle's Fortune 500 companies now. Turns out being publicly humiliated gives you a certain edge in crisis management. Elliot tugged my dress. Mommy, that man looks like us. The ballroom held its breath. Yes, baby, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. He does look like you. Genetics are funny that way. Damian took a step forward, then stopped, his face cycling through emotions I'd never seen him display publicly. Shock, recognition, something that might have been regret. Security, Delilah snapped. Remove them. I wouldn't. I held up my phone. My attorney is on speed dial, and I promise you the lawsuit would be comprehensive. Besides, I smiled sweetly, I'm a shareholder now. This is a company event. I have every right to be here. The board members were already whispering among themselves. I recognized the calculations in their eyes. Scandal versus opportunity, disruption versus potential profit. I'd played this game long enough to know which way the wind would blow. Gentlemen, I addressed them directly, ignoring Damian's stunned silence. Shall we discuss the concerning patterns in Whitmore's international portfolio? I have some questions about the Cayman Island subsidiaries. The emergency board meeting convened at midnight, long after I'd sent my boys home with Maya. They'd fallen asleep in the car, exhausted from their first glimpse into the world their father ruled. This is highly irregular, Charles Brennan, the lead board member, kept repeating, though his eyes gleamed with the kind of interest that came from sensing blood in the water. Delilah paced like a caged predator. She's obviously manufactured these shares through fraudulent. Every transaction is documented, my lawyer James Chen interrupted smoothly. Would you like to review the paper trail? It's quite extensive. What Delilah didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been investigating her for 2 years, the late-night calls to accounts in the Caymans, the shell companies bleeding Whitmore estates dry, one contract at a time. She'd been so careful, but greed always leaves fingerprints. I motioned for a psychological evaluation of our CEO, Delilah announced suddenly. The stress of discovering he has 4 sons. Alleged sons, Damian corrected quietly, his first words since the ballroom. The room went silent. I felt something crack in my chest. Hairline fractures in armor I'd thought was impenetrable. Yes, I said slowly. Alleged. Though I have medical records, birth certificates, and a standing offer for paternity testing whenever you're ready to stop being a coward. You dare, he started. I dare a lot of things now. I stood, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming me. But right now I need to get home. One of my sons, one of those alleged boys, has been sick. Autoimmune condition. He needs treatment that costs more than most people make in a year. Treatment I've been paying for alone while building the stake in your company. I gathered my papers, watching Damian's face change as the implications sank in. Which one? The question escaped him before he could stop it. Like you care. But even as the words left my mouth, I saw something in his eyes that made me pause. Elliot, the smallest one, he has primary immunodeficiency. His body can't fight infections properly. The boardroom door clicked shut behind me, but not before I heard Charles Brennan say, Damian, we need to discuss the real issue here, these Cayman accounts. In the parking garage, I finally let myself cry. Not the pretty tears of movies, but ugly, body-shaking sobs that echoed off concrete walls. Because for just a moment in that boardroom, I'd seen the man I'd fallen in love with, concerned, human, real. And then he'd called my boys alleged, and I remembered why I was really here. My phone buzzed. An unknown number, but I recognized the extension. Damian's private line. The medical records. Send them to me. I hung up without responding. But later that night, after checking on each sleeping boy, kissing 4 foreheads that burned too warm with Elliot's recurring fever, I sent everything. Every test, every treatment, every specialist consultation. The response came at 3 a.m. I need to see the DNA results. Then take the test, I typed back. 3 dots appeared and disappeared for 5 minutes before his response. My office. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Bring the boys. I stared at that message until sunrise, wondering if I was about to make the best or worst decision of my life. The boys were unusually quiet as we rode the elevator to the top floor of Whitmore Tower. Elliot held my hand, his small fingers burning with fever despite the medication. Will the mean lady be there? Evan asked. What mean lady? The one in the red dress who looked at you like the evil queen looked at Snow White. I bit back a laugh. No, baby. Just the man who looks like you. Damian's office hadn't changed. All glass and steel and cold efficiency. But the man behind the desk had. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His usually perfect suit was wrinkled, and his hands, those steady hands that had signed my life away, trembled as he watched 4 small boys file into his domain. Hello? Edward, my boldest, stepped forward. I'm Edward. This is Ethan, Evan, and Elliot. We're alphabetical. Something broke in Damian's face. He came around the desk slowly, like approaching wild animals, and knelt to their level. Hello, Edward. His voice was rough. I'm Damian. We know, Ethan said matter-of-factly. Mom showed us pictures from before. Before what? Before you threw us away. A fool. The words, delivered in a child's innocent voice, hit like physical blows. Damian's eyes found mine over their heads, and for the first time since that horrible night, I saw real pain there. The test, I said quietly. You wanted the test. The medical team he'd arranged was thorough. Too thorough. Blood draws, cheek swabs, enough samples to test 3 times over. Elliot cried, not from the needle, but from exhaustion, and without thinking, Damian picked him up. It's okay, he murmured, the words awkward, unpracticed. You're brave. You're so brave. Elliot studied him with those serious gray eyes, Damian's eyes, and slowly laid his head on his shoulder. I watched my ex-husband's world reorganize itself in real time, his arm coming around the small body like it had always belonged there. The results will take, the technician started. 3 hours, Damian cut him off. I've arranged for expedited processing. We waited in his office, the boys exploring while Damian and I existed in careful silence. They found his architecture awards, his model buildings, the pictures he still kept, our wedding photo tucked behind a stack of contracts like a guilty secret. Why is Mom in this picture with you? Evan asked. We were married, Damian said simply. But you're not now. No. Why? Damian looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. Because I made a terrible mistake. The results came as Elliot dozed on the office couch, fever spiking despite another round of medication. Damian's hands shook as he opened the envelope. I didn't need to see the papers to know what they said. His face told the story. Color draining, eyes closing, the slow collapse of a man realizing he'd destroyed everything that mattered. They're mine. The words came out broken. All 4. Identical DNA. They're... God, Valentina, they're mine. I know, I said quietly. I've always known. But I'm sterile. The tests showed. The tests were wrong or falsified. I pulled out my phone, showing him documents I'd uncovered. Delilah had access to your medical files. She's had access to everything. He stared at the evidence, puzzle pieces clicking into place. The night of the gala. The investigator she recommended. The reports that came just hours before. She played you, I said simply. And you let her. You believed her over me. You chose your pride over our family. Elliot whimpered in his sleep, and Damian moved without thinking, pressing a hand to his forehead. He's burning up. He needs treatment, I said. Specialized immunoglobulin therapy. But there's a better option, a stem cell transplant from a matched donor. A parent would be ideal, but I'll do it. No hesitation. Whatever he needs, all of them, whatever they need. It's dangerous. There are risks. They're my sons. He said it like a vow, like a prayer, like a man waking from a 5-year nightmare. I'll do whatever it takes. The emergency board meeting I called for the next week was standing room only. Delilah arrived in her power suit, confident until she saw the FBI agents I'd invited. What is this? She demanded. This, I said, pulling up the presentation I'd spent 2 years building, is the end of your game. The evidence was overwhelming. Shell companies in the Caymans draining Whitmore estates through inflated contracts, offshore accounts hiding millions. But the coup de grace was the email trail. Her correspondence with the private investigator who'd fabricated the evidence against me, the doctor who'd falsified Damian's fertility tests, the carefully orchestrated destruction of my marriage. You were obsessed with him, I said, addressing her directly while the board watched in horror. But it wasn't love. It was possession. You couldn't have him, so you made sure no one could. You can't prove. Actually, she can. Damian entered with his own lawyers and a box of documents. I've been investigating too, Valentina, for the last week since learning the truth. He looked different, exhausted but determined, like a man who'd finally found his purpose. Every transaction traced, every communication recovered. He placed the evidence before the board. She didn't just steal from the company. She stole 5 years from my sons, from their mother, from me. Delilah's composure finally cracked. I saved you. She would have made you weak, distracted you with domestic nonsense. She would have made me whole. The words rang through the boardroom. I have 4 sons I've never held. First steps I missed. First words I'll never hear. Because I believed you. The FBI agents stepped forward. Delilah Morrison, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. As they led her away, she turned back one last time. You'll thank me one day. Love makes you vulnerable. No, Damian said quietly. Love makes you invincible. I just learned that too late. The board voted unanimously. Full restitution, my position secured, and a settlement that would ensure my boys never wanted for anything. But as papers were signed and hands were shaken, I felt empty. Justice wasn't healing. Money wasn't redemption. I found Damian on the observation deck afterward, staring out at Seattle's skyline. The transplant is scheduled for next week, he said without turning. Elliot's doctors are optimistic. Thank you. Don't. His voice was raw. Don't thank me for doing the bare minimum as a father. Then what do you want me to say? He turned, and I saw tears, actual tears, on his face. Say you'll let me try. Not for us, I know that bridge is burned, but for them. Let me be their father. Let me learn how. I thought about 5 years of single motherhood, 4 birthday parties he'd missed, countless nights walking the floor with sick children, wondering if their father would have known what to do. Elliot asked about you yesterday, I admitted. He wanted to know if you were coming back. What did you tell him? The truth, that I didn't know. He nodded, accepting the honesty. I'm selling the Silverwood house. Too many ghosts, but I'm buying the property next to yours in Boulder. If that's okay. The gesture stunned me. He was willing to leave everything, his empire, his city, his life, to be near them. We'll start with supervised visits, I said carefully. See how it goes. That's more than I deserve. He pulled out an envelope, worn from handling. I've been carrying this for 5 years. Never sent it. Inside was a letter dated the day after the gala. Valentina, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please come home. Why didn't you send it? Pride, fear. Delilah convincing me you were better off without me. He laughed bitterly. Turns out she was right about one thing. You were better off. You became extraordinary without me. December arrived with unusual snow for Seattle, blanketing Silverwood in white for our first and last Christmas in the old house. Damian had invited us for one final gathering before the sale, and against my better judgment, I'd agreed. The boys had been visiting him for 3 months, supervised at first, then slowly, cautiously, more freedom. He'd learned their routines. Ethan needed exactly 3 stories at bedtime. Evan wouldn't eat crusts. Edward collected rocks obsessively, and Elliot needed his inhaler within reach always. Dad fixed the tree, Edward announced, pulling me into the grand living room where a 12-foot pine touched the coffered ceiling. Dad. The word still made my chest tight. But seeing Damian on a ladder, carefully placing the star while 4 boys directed him like tiny foremen, something in my armor cracked. A little left. No, right. Higher. Perfect. He caught my eye and smiled, not the corporate smile I remembered, but something genuine and unguarded. He looked younger, somehow. Despite the exhaustion from Elliot's treatment, the bone marrow transplant had been successful, but recovery was slow. "Mommy, look!" Elliot, still pale but stronger every day, showed me an ornament. "Dad saved all the ones from when you lived here." Indeed, our entire history hung on the tree. The glass hearts from our honeymoon in Venice, the silver bells from our first anniversary, the tiny ceramic cottage that looked like silverwood inscribed "Our Forever Home." "I couldn't throw them away," Damian said quietly, climbing down. "Even when I thought I couldn't." The boys scattered to explore the presents underneath, a mountain of wrapped packages that spoke to Damian's attempts to make up for lost time. "You'll spoil them," I warned. "Good. Someone should." We worked in comfortable silence, adjusting ornaments, filling stockings. It felt dangerously familiar, like muscle memory of a life we'd shared. When his hand brushed mine, reaching for the same decoration, neither of us pulled away immediately. "Valentina," he started, then stopped, struggling. "The divorce papers, you never signed them." I'd wondered when he'd notice. "Neither did you." "I couldn't. Even hating you, thinking I hated you, I couldn't. And now?" He turned to face me fully. "Now I know the truth, that I threw away the only woman who ever loved me for me, not my money or name, the mother of my children, my best friend. I threw you away for a lie, and I'll never forgive myself." "Mom?" Evan appeared in the doorway. "Elliot's asking for you, both of you." We found our smallest warrior curled on the couch, wrapped in the quilt my mother had made years ago, one of the few things I'd taken when I left. "My bones hurt," he whispered. "That's normal, buddy," Damian said, sitting carefully beside him. "The new cells are growing, making you stronger." "Will you tell us a story?" Elliot asked. "About when you and Mommy were happy?" Damian looked at me, questioning. I nodded. So he told them about our beginning, how we'd met at a charity auction where I'd accidentally bid $10,000 on a painting while distracted, how he'd rescued me by outbidding, then asked for coffee as repayment, how we'd talked until sunrise about everything and nothing. "You loved each other," Edward said matter-of-factly. "Yes," Damian said simply. "We did." "Do you still?" The question hung in the air like suspended snow. I waited for Damian to deflect, to give some corporate non-answer. "I never stopped," he said instead, looking directly at me. "I just got lost for a while." That night, after the boys were asleep, we stood in the kitchen where I'd once cooked Sunday dinners and dreamed of filling this house with children. "The realtor says the new family has 4 kids," Damian said. "It feels right, doesn't it? This house needs chaos." "Where will you go after the sale?" "Boulder, like I promised. The house next door to yours closes next month." He paused. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." "Daddy?" Elliot's voice from the stairs. "I can't sleep. Will you and Mommy both tuck me in?" We went together, flanking his bed like guardians. As I smoothed his hair and Damian adjusted his blankets, Elliot smiled sleepily. "This is nice," he murmured, "having both of you." Later, as I gathered our things to leave, Damian pressed something into my hand, a key. "To the new house in Boulder," he explained. In case the boys ever need me when I'm not there, or you do." I pocketed it, without comment, but we both knew something had shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe, possibly, the beginning of a beginning. Spring came early to Boulder, melting the snow that had covered our secrets all winter. The boys ran between our houses like they'd always been neighbors, wearing a path through the hedge that separated the properties. I found Damian in his study one evening, surrounded by boxes from Silverwood. He was holding a leather journal, his face pale. "My grandfather's," he said, showing me entries dated 50 years ago. He left the family to protect them from a financial scandal, lost everything so they could keep their reputation. The parallel was haunting. Generations of Whitmore men choosing isolation over vulnerability, pride over connection. "My father did the same," Damian continued. "Left when I was 12, said emotion was weakness." He looked up at me. "I became exactly what they were, what they taught me to be." "But you came back," I pointed out. "You chose differently." only after losing everything that mattered. We'd been dancing around each other for months, co-parents but not partners, careful and cordial, but never crossing the invisible line we'd drawn. But watching him with the boys, seeing him learn to be the father he'd never had, something in me was slowly thawing. "Mom!" Edward burst in. "Come quick, Elliot's presenting his science project." The school auditorium was packed. Elliot stood on stage, still small for his age, but glowing with health, explaining his project on bone marrow transplants with the authority of lived experience. "My dad saved my life," he said simply, matter-of-factly, the way children state profound truths. "His cells are helping mine work better. We match perfectly." Damian gripped my hand without thinking, and I let him. After the presentation, as families mingled, I overheard two mothers talking. "The Whitmore boys are so lucky," one said, "having parents who worked through everything for them." "Are they back together?" the other asked. "Who knows? But look at them. They're a family either way." That night, Damian and I sat on my porch while the boys played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm air. "The Monroe Legacy Fund has approved its first 100 scholarships," he said, "for children from broken homes who need medical treatment." We'd created the fund together, pooling resources to help families facing what we'd faced alone. "That's wonderful. Valentina." He turned to me, and I saw the man I'd married beneath all the scar tissue. "I know I have no right to ask, but could we try? Not to go back. We can't. But forward? Build something new?" I thought about 5 years of anger, of single motherhood, of proving I didn't need him. Then I thought about Elliot asking why other kids' parents lived together, about Edward's smile when Damian taught him to ride a bike, about the way my heart still stuttered when he walked into a room. "We're different people now," I said carefully. "Better people, I hope. Damaged people. Aren't we all?" A fair point. We sat in silence, watching our boys, our miracles, chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "No promises," I finally said. "No grand gestures, just see what happens." "That's more than enough." Elliot ran over, jar of fireflies glowing in his hands. "Look, Mommy! Dad, we caught stars!" Damian lifted him onto his lap, and I leaned against his shoulder, feeling the three of us fit together like pieces of a puzzle we'd broken and painstakingly reassembled. "Should we let them go?" Elliot asked, watching the fireflies bump against the glass. "Always," I said, unscrewing the lid. "The best things come back when they're free to choose." The fireflies dispersed into the night, blinking their ancient rhythm. But one circled back, landing on our joined hands for just a moment before spiraling up toward the stars. "Make a wish," Damian whispered, but I didn't need to. Everything I'd wished for was here. Complicated, imperfect, scarred, but whole. We'd traveled through winter and found spring. We'd broken everything and discovered that sometimes the mended places are the strongest. As the boys called for us to join their game, we stood together, not as the people we'd been, but as who we'd become. A family forged in loss, strengthened by truth, and held together by 4 small boys who'd taught us that love isn't about being perfect. It's about coming home.